You ever have a moment that seemed so small, so ordinary at first, but somehow it sticks with you? Like a tiny splinter beneath the skin. You can't see it, but you feel it. Every time you move. Every time you breathe. That's what this is for me. It didn't start with a touch. Or a look. Or even anything you'd call wrong. It started with a question. One I didn't expect. From someone I should have never seen that way. It was just another Sunday. My husband was away on one of his usual business trips. He'd been gone all week. Said he might be back Monday, maybe Tuesday. I didn't bother asking which. The house was quiet. Too quiet. You know that kind of silence where the air feels heavier? Like the walls themselves are listening? I'd been sitting on the couch, halfway through reheating leftovers I wasn't even hungry for, when the doorbell rang. It was Jared, my husband's nephew. He smiled, sheepish like he always does. Said he was in the neighborhood. Thought he'd stop by to check on me. I told him he didn't have to, but I let him in anyway. I shouldn't have. But I did. We sat at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of coffee between us, steam curling into the cold air. He looked older somehow. Not like the college kid I remembered. His shoulders had filled out. His voice had this softness, but a depth too. Like he'd been through things. Like he saw things most people missed. He looked at me for a moment, not in that way, but in a way that made me feel seen. And he said, "Auntie, are you happy?" Just like that. No warning. No lead-in. Just, "Are you happy?" And my world paused. Right there in the kitchen. Between the hum of the fridge and the ticking of that old wall clock we never changed batteries in. What was I supposed to say? That I hadn't felt truly noticed in years? That my husband's touch had turned into a routine? That I couldn't remember the last time someone asked me how I was, without expecting something in return? So instead, I laughed. Brushed it off. Said something about work stress and getting older. He didn't press. He just nodded, like he understood. And that's what scared me. That look in his eyes, the one that said, "I see you." The one that made my chest ache in a way I wasn't ready for. That moment, that one tiny conversation, it did something to me. And now, every time I hear a message notification, every time I walk past that corner of the kitchen table, every time I close my eyes at night, I wonder, what if I had never let him in that day? What if I had just said, "No, Jared, today's not a good time"? What if I'd ignored the doorbell? But I didn't. I opened the door. And with it, I opened something else. Something I can't seem to shut again. So, if you're still listening, if any part of this feels familiar, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because some stories, they don't scream, they whisper. And they live in silence. I'm 38. Married 12 years. No children. It's not that we didn't try. We did. Or maybe I tried. Eventually, the trying just faded into silence. Like everything else in our marriage, my husband is distant. He always has been. He travels for work, or so he says. Sometimes gone for days. Sometimes a week. Sometimes I stop counting. We live in a quiet suburb. The kind where neighbors wave but don't talk. The kind where you hear your own footsteps echoing down the driveway. I spend most of my evenings alone. I clean dishes that only I've used. I watch shows I don't even enjoy. I scroll through my phone just to feel like someone might still reach out. And then there's Jared. He's 24 now. My husband's nephew. His sister's only son. I remember when he was just a shy teenager, awkward, polite, always trailing behind his mom at family gatherings. He barely spoke unless spoken to. But something changed. Somewhere in the years I wasn't paying attention. He started stopping by. First just holidays. Then birthdays. Then random visits. He said he was passing through. Grabbing something he left at his uncle's. Just wanted to say hi. I didn't think much of it at first. Just a nice gesture. Harmless. But over time, the visits became longer. More frequent. And it stopped being about his uncle. He started asking about me. What I liked. What I watched. what I read. He listened. He actually listened. I used to think of Jared as just a kid. But he wasn't the quiet boy anymore. His voice had grown deeper. His posture more confident. He carried himself like a man who knew how the world worked and wasn't afraid of it. And there were moments, small ones, where I'd catch him watching me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable. Not at first. It was more curious. Like he was studying me. Like he saw something no one else bothered to notice. There were times he opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. But he'd stop himself. Smile. Look away. I never asked. I never pressed. Until the day he did it was a Thursday evening. The kind where the sun sets a little too early and the house feels colder than usual. My husband had flown out that morning. Some conference in another city. I didn't ask where. I didn't even say goodbye properly. Just a distracted wave at the door and the sound of his suitcase wheels scraping the floor. I was halfway through folding laundry, just trying to keep my hands busy, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. And there he was. Jared. No warning. No text. Just him. Standing on the porch with that crooked smile and a paper bag in his hand. He said he picked up Thai food. Said he thought maybe I hadn't eaten. He was right. I told him to come in. We sat at the dining table, dishes spread out between us, soft music playing from the speaker. The kind of music that fills silence without asking questions. We talked. About books. About a film he'd seen that reminded him of me. About regrets. And choices. And the strange ache of growing older. At some point, I stopped noticing how late it was. The house around us seemed to blur, like the rest of the world had fallen asleep, and only we were awake. There wasn't any flirtation. No lingering touches. Just something deeper. It was the kind of conversation that strips you bare without taking off a single piece of clothing. He asked me about my favorite childhood memory. I told him about an old swing set my dad built when I was 7. He smiled, then said he never had anything like that. That sometimes he envied people who could remember warmth without effort. And then he looked me in the eye. Just looked. No smile. No mask. You always seem so sad, he said. Are you? It hit me harder than I expected. No one had ever asked me that. Not my husband. Not my friends, what few I had left. Not even me. I wanted to lie. To shrug it off. But I didn't. I looked down at the table. At my empty plate. At the ring on my finger. I don't know, I whispered. There was silence. Not awkward. Just heavy. Then he leaned forward, his voice even softer. I think you deserve to feel more than just okay. And, just like that, my breath caught. Because in all these years, no one had ever said that to me. Not in words. Not in eyes. Not in actions. Just that one sentence, spoken in a quiet kitchen over cold noodles. That was the moment. The moment something shifted. Not love. Not lust. But a door opening somewhere I thought had long been brick shut. And then he said something that made my chest tighten, something I still hear in my head when the nights get too quiet. That night, after Jared left, I sat on the couch long after the dishes were done and the house went still again. I stared at the shadows on the wall, replaying his voice in my head. I think you deserve to feel more than just okay. It was such a simple sentence. But it split something open in me. Why did it matter so much that he noticed me? Why did his words feel like they reached deeper than anything my husband had said in years? I tried to brush it off. Told myself it was just a kind gesture. That I was overthinking it. But the truth is, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about him. That soft way he looked at me like I was more than just someone's wife. More than a name on a mailbox. Like I was still someone. The guilt started creeping in almost immediately. Not because I had done anything, but because I had felt something. And that feeling, it wasn't neutral. It wasn't sisterly. It wasn't innocent. It was a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. The kind that sits just under the skin, humming quietly, waiting to be fed. And I hated that I missed it the moment he left. I told myself it was nothing. Just two people talking. Just a nephew checking on his uncle's wife. But in my heart, I already knew it wasn't that simple. Because I remember the last time my husband asked me if I was okay. It was 4 years ago, after my mother died. And even then, it sounded more like a chore than a question. He didn't hold me that night. He didn't sit up with me when I couldn't sleep. He left for work the next morning like nothing happened. And when I cried in the shower, I made sure the water was hot enough to drown the sound. Since then, it's been a slow unraveling. Missed anniversaries, always blamed on meetings. Gifts that came with receipts still tucked inside the bag. Dinners eaten in silence, across from a man who once made me laugh until I cried, now scrolling through his phone, not even looking up when I spoke. And the bed. God, the bed. It used to be a place of connection. Now, it's just two bodies occupying the same space, turned back to back, with miles of cold sheets between us. So when Jared looked at me like I still had light inside, like I was still worth seeing, it shook me. Was I really that starved for affection, that I'd mistake concern for desire? Or maybe I wasn't mistaking anything. Maybe I was finally feeling something real after years of numbness. But then the shame would creep in. Because I wasn't supposed to feel this way. Not for him. Not for anyone but the man I married. And yet, here I was, lying in a bed next to that man, staring at the ceiling, wishing it was someone else who had asked if I was happy, wishing it was someone else's voice I heard in the dark, wishing I could feel what I felt at that kitchen table. Just once more, that hunger for connection. It wasn't just about Jared. It was about everything I'd buried under years of being fine. Fine when I wasn't. Smiling when I was breaking. And now that someone had finally seen through it, I didn't know how to unfeel what had already been felt. After that night, something changed. Jared started coming by more often. He stopped waiting for an invitation. He just showed up. Sometimes with groceries. Sometimes with my favorite pastries from that little bakery on 9th. He remembered I liked the ones with raspberry filling. My husband never remembered that. Other times, he'd offer to help. Fix a leaky tap. Carry in heavy boxes. Rearrange the shelves in the garage I kept saying I'd get to but never did. And every time he came, it felt easier to let him stay just a little longer. We'd talk. Not just about the weather or the news. But really talk. He told me about his job, how it drained him. How he felt like no one ever really saw him for who he was. Just expectations. Just pressure. Just noise. I told him things too. Not all at once. Just in pieces. The kind you only say out loud when you know someone won't judge you for it. And then, one evening, I asked him to help me organize the attic. It was summer. Hot. Dusty. Old boxes. Forgotten memories. The smell of time. We were laughing about a hideous photo album my husband had buried up there, one from the early years when we still used to take pictures together. And then our hands touched. Not by accident. Not entirely. He handed me a box and our fingers met and stayed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even romantic. But there was a pause. That kind of pause that lives in the space between two people who aren't quite sure what they're becoming. I looked up at him. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. We just stood there for a moment, in the attic's thick silence, surrounded by the forgotten weight of other people's memories. He broke the moment gently, said we should take a break. Went down to grab some water. But when he came back, his eyes wouldn't meet mine, not right away. The next few visits were quieter. Still kind, still thoughtful. But something unspoken hovered between us. Then, one afternoon, he sat across from me on the porch, sun dipping low behind the trees, and he said, "Sometimes I feel like I've been invisible my whole life. Like I've always had to pretend everything's fine just to keep people from walking away." I didn't know what to say. Because I'd thought that exact thing so many times, I could have said it in my sleep. He looked up at me then. Really looked. and asked, "Have you ever felt trapped in your own life?" I didn't answer. But I didn't have to. Because the silence between us said it all. We were both invisible people, finally being seen. And that scared me more than anything. Because being seen means being vulnerable. Being vulnerable means being open. And being open means you can be touched. That night, when he left, I walked him to the door. We stood there for a second, like we didn't know what goodbye meant anymore. And then he hugged me. Not the quick, polite kind. It was longer, warmer, a little too tight. His hands rested at my back. Mine hovered, then settled. And I let him. I closed my eyes for a second too long, and in that quiet space between breath and goodbye, I felt everything I had been trying so hard not to feel. When the door closed behind him, the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like something had cracked open and nothing was going to fit the same again. It was raining. Not the gentle kind that taps on the window and soothes you to sleep, but the kind that soaks the air with something thick. Heavy. Restless. The sky outside looked bruised. Thunder low and distant, like it was holding something back. I'd been curled up on the couch with a book I wasn't really reading when the doorbell rang. Jared, soaked to the bone, water dripping from his hoodie, a half apology in his smile. I was nearby. Got caught in it. Thought I'd stop in until it passed. I could have said no. I should have said no. But I stepped aside. Let him in. I handed him a towel. Told him to warm up. Started reheating dinner, even though I hadn't planned to eat much. He stayed. I poured wine. We laughed more than usual. About small things. Silly things. Things that didn't matter until they did. I put on music. Something slow. Old. The kind of song that lives in the background but fills every room it touches. And at some point, he stood behind me in the kitchen. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, even through the damp air. I turned. He didn't move. The laughter had faded. The music kept playing. But everything else stilled. He looked at me longer than usual. Not searching. Not questioning. Just there. And I saw it. All of it. Loneliness. Need. Curiosity. Pain. The kind of look that says, "I see you," even when you're trying not to be seen. I don't know who moved first. Maybe neither of us did. But he leaned in, and his lips brushed my cheek. Not my mouth. Just the space right beside it, soft, slow, lingering. A place that felt more intimate somehow. More dangerous. My breath trembled. My heart screamed. And yet, I didn't stop him. It wasn't a kiss. Not really. But it wasn't innocent either. It was something in between. A crossing of a line we had danced around for too long. And in that moment, standing there in the kitchen with the rain tapping on the windows and the wine still warm in our glasses, I knew we had gone somewhere we couldn't come back from. And then, the front door clicked. The sound echoed like thunder inside the house. I froze. So did he. Footsteps. Familiar. Slow. My husband was home early. The moment I heard the key turn in the lock, something inside me snapped to attention. Jared didn't say a word. He just looked at me, eyes wide, breath tight, and I nodded. Barely. Just enough. He understood. Without another glance, he slipped out the back door. Quiet. Careful. Like he'd never been there at all. I turned toward the front, just as my husband stepped inside. Wet shoes. Tired eyes. He dropped his bag by the door and looked at me with that blank expression I'd grown too used to. "You're still up?" he asked. I smiled. It was the kind of smile that hurts your cheeks because it doesn't come from anywhere real. I told him I couldn't sleep. Blamed it on the weather. He kissed my cheek, distant and distracted, and walked past me into the bedroom. Never noticed the 2 wine glasses. Never asked why the couch cushions were out of place. Never felt the storm that had just passed through the kitchen. That night, I lay in bed beside him, eyes wide open, listening to the rain soften outside. He slept within minutes. And I just stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. One message. Are you okay? It was Jared. I didn't answer. The next day, another message. Can we talk? Still, I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to. I told myself I needed time. Space. I told myself I needed to focus on my marriage. I told myself I needed closure. But the truth? Deep down, I wanted something else. I wanted him. I wanted to hear that voice again. To feel that quiet understanding that had wrapped itself around me like a second skin. The messages kept coming. Not needy, not pushy, just present. Little reminders that I hadn't imagined what happened. After a week, I finally responded. Let's meet. Just once. To talk. We picked a coffee shop on the far side of town. Somewhere neither of us would be recognized. Somewhere quiet. He was already there when I arrived. No smile. No warmth. Just those same eyes that had seen too much. I sat down across from him. My hands were shaking. I think we both know this has to stop, I said. He didn't argue. Just nodded. But he didn't leave. Didn't stand up. He stayed right there. Silent. Still. And in that pause, I realized some endings don't come with doors slamming or voices raised. Sometimes. They just sit in front of you. Waiting. For what? You're not sure. It's been weeks now. The house has gone back to being quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears, like it's trying to say something you're not ready to hear. Jared hasn't texted since that day in the coffee shop. No more messages. No check-ins. No quiet, "Are you okay?" lighting up my screen in the middle of the night. And still, I check. I'll catch myself staring at my phone like it might somehow pull him back into my life, like his name might appear if I just will it hard enough. And then, when it doesn't, I feel relief. And shame. Because what does it say about me? That I miss him? That I ache for a conversation I should have never let happen? I didn't cheat. Not by most definitions. There was no kiss. No secret rendezvous under dim lights. No tangled sheets or whispered promises. But I crossed a line. I crossed it the moment I started needing his attention more than I needed my husband's. And maybe that's worse. Because what Jared gave me wasn't a touch. It was feeling. He made me feel like I mattered. Like I still had softness inside me. Like I wasn't just someone's obligation. I walk around this house now, touching things he once touched. A mug. A book. The edge of the attic stairs. And every time, something inside me tightens. Sometimes I catch myself smiling at a memory. And then, just as quickly, I feel it wash over me, this deep, stinging guilt. I betrayed no vows. I kissed no lips. But in my heart, I know I stepped into something I can never undo. I think about the weight of what never happened. Because sometimes, it's not the affair that breaks you. It's the almost. It's the long hug in the doorway, the wine shared over silence, the way someone looks at you like you're still alive. And the worst part? I don't know if I regret it. I miss it. And that terrifies me. What does it mean to long for something that made you feel seen, but also made you